Welcome back to the Football Show. Gareth Southgate is here with us. Good morning, Gareth.
Good morning. Morning, Vicky. Morning, Cara. Morning, Gary.
Morning. Hi, guys.
Now, look, Gareth, in a parallel universe, England are preparing to take on Croatia on Sunday at Wembley. What have you been doing with your time at the moment?
Yes, I've not even thought about that aspect of it, really. But, a lot of work internally at the FA. We've obviously got development teams, senior teams, so trying to plan what we will be doing over the next few months. We've been reviewing all matches back, all of our players' performances, looking through all their data to get a clearer insight on all of the squad. And then, like a lot of coaches around the world, there's been lots of opportunities to learn, share ideas. So lots of webinars, lots of podcasts, lots of reading. So it's been actually surprisingly busy period, given there's been no football.
Yeah. How disappointing has it been for you personally? Have you been in touch with your players as well?
Yeah. I've spoken with pretty much all of the players now. There's a couple more I want to get to in a few days. And just can really see how they've been getting on, see how their families are. Broader life conversations, really. I think they have got through that period now, obviously, of getting back into the clubs and training as a group. So I've got to say, they were all very resilient when I spoke to them. They were disappointed not to be training and playing. That's what they live for. But they recognised the bigger picture. And I think they've come through that period pretty well, really.
Look, I'm sure you heard the show a little bit earlier. We were talking to Troy Townsend. And in light of the death of George Floyd and the subsequent protests and comments that several of our England players, in particular our BAME players, have you spoken directly to any of them? What have they said?
I haven't spoken to them since the incident last week about this specific fact, because in actual fact, I know where they stand on it. I know the players very well. I know I've had enough conversations with them over a long period of time to recognise that they would be emotional, frustrated, angry, passionate. I know Troy and Raheem used the word tired. And I've got a lot of empathy with where they stand on everything. And triggered a reaction around the world. And we've to hope that, I've been here before. We've talked before about moments that might change society. We've to hope that this certainly does feel different when I look at the sort of broader nature of people who have protested. When I look at younger generations of people who have had different life experiences to maybe people that have had decades of trying to battle against this situation in society. And I know we'll come on to talk about football's role in that, but it is a broader perspective we've got to look at as well. So I think people have spoken brilliantly. I think it's been educative of ways. There are some fantastic people who've spoken. I know it's occupied a lot of my thinking over the last week, in particular, as you get insightful opinions and reminders of history and what's gone on.
Look, you yourself, you mentioned it there, you witnessed racism firsthand in both Montenegro and Sofia against your players. UEFA protocol was in place. It was followed in Bulgaria, not to the letter, but it was followed. But I wanted to ask you, as their manager at the time, I know the players said they wanted to come out after half-time, but was there a minute where you felt like taking matters into your own hands and not allowing them to go back on?
Well, I think it's important to discuss what happened to us in Montenegro first, because in Montenegro, we weren't aware that Danny Rose had been abused early in the match. He didn't actually say anything to us at half-time. And it's a strange situation when you're on the side of the pitch, because there are times when you're really attuned to the noise, and there are other times where there are obviously chants going on that you can't quite distinguish. And in Bulgaria, there were moments where it was really clear when Tyrone Mings had the ball, and I think we were waiting anyway for the situation. In Montenegro, that wasn't so clear, and we felt a bit underprepared in Montenegro. We didn't even know anything about the UEFA protocols at that time. So we took it upon ourselves over the next period to really prepare ourselves for that night in Bulgaria as a group of players and as a group of staff. I mean, Troy has been in to speak to our coaching staff before, and I sought opinions from people like Mark Bright, Chris Powell, before we went to Montenegro, to Bulgaria. And we had a long discussion with the players days before the game regarding how they saw it, what they wanted the approach to be, that they were clear that we were there to support, that we had the backing of the FA to do whatever we thought was necessary. But there is also a requirement to follow the regulations as well. You know, we're in a competition. We've got to follow some of those guidelines. So we were in a position where we did the right thing, not just to do something to be seen to be doing, to be trying to be the heroes and make a stance if it wasn't necessary. But as the evening was going on, you know, I have to say, Steve Holland and myself on the sideline, there were moments in the first half where we didn't think we would get through the game. In the warm-up, there were incidents in the warm-up. We were reported to UEFA. We followed the protocol during that first half, and we got to half-time or just before half-time, and the players said, look, let's get in the dressing room. We want to discuss it at half-time. We had a long discussion at half-time, you know, bearing in mind it really dominated the thinking. Thankfully, we were well ahead in the game. We didn't have to think about the match by that point. And we were very clear, the players were very clear, had there been another incident in that second half, then we were prepared to walk. Now, I've heard people say that there was abuse in the second half. You know, none of the players were conscious of that. We weren't conscious of that. A big section of the ground were evicted at half-time. So we didn't feel on the night that the next step was appropriate. We wouldn't hesitate to go to the next step if we were in that situation again. And I agree that I don't think the protocol of allowing people almost 2 free hits is really acceptable. But I do think what happened on the night had an impact. You know, there's never been an international game that's been interrupted in that nature before. When the England team are on the front pages of every newspaper worldwide, that has an impact. And in fairness, the Bulgarian FA sacked their president. They removed a couple of other committee members. They actually wrote to all of our players to apologise personally. So things did happen. I agree that, you know, we've always got to get further. And frankly, when we're at the point where we're having to take action on the pitch, it's gone too far anyway. You know, the situation's got to be addressed before we even get into the stadiums in society.
Guys, I played in games where my England teammates were racially abused, the one in Madrid with Ashley Cole famously, and didn't do anything about it. You've just talked us through your experiences as a coach in Montenegro and Bulgaria. UEFA and FIFA have proven themselves to be inept in dealing with racism severely with respect to the fines that they hand out are paltry. It sounds like you've had to read an instruction manual on what to go through to have to deal with in different parts of the game. It feels to me, with what's happened in these last few weeks, that the time has come now for an England team to be the ones who, if they were racially abused again, to walk off the pitch. Is that where you're at?
Gary, I will always, it's easy to give a throwaway line. You know, it's like it's easy to put a hashtag out or to put a social media post out. I think it's actions that in the end are what count. So we can talk through the hypotheticals, and it would be easy for me to sit here and say, we would definitely do X, Y, or Z the next time. Everything's got to have the context of that moment. And having lived through it, that moment was incredibly complicated for all of us. The most important thing to me at that time was that I think if you speak to our players that night, they felt supported, they felt clear on the policy. And I also think that we should refrain from just talking about, you know, what happened in Bulgaria and in other countries. We've got to address what's going on in our own country and in our own stadiums first. We're very quick to jump down the throats of people in countries maybe in Eastern Europe who aren't as diverse in their population as we are, and as a consequence aren't as far ahead as we are or should be in this battle.
if you do take yourself back to how you felt though that night, which was obviously very uncomfortable in Bulgaria, if the same scenario occurred like that again, though, would you feel compelled to? It's not. I accept it's maybe not the easiest thing to answer, and I'm not looking for the sort of headline out of you. I just feel like the anger that's built up in this last week. It feels to me like the moment is now or never. It feels like if there are going to be actions, there is no way that football players and managers, and I'm wholly in support of it, can stay on a football pitch where there is racial abuse happening in the future. There has to be action. There's no longer hashtags, campaigns, T-shirts. Those days have gone.
Yeah, I think that's clear across every level of the game and every level of society. People have spoken brilliantly this week. Chris Grant is somebody who I've met a number of times, lectured me in a couple of courses I went on about the institutional racism that he feels exists in sporting bodies, sporting governance. I think all of those areas are where we've got to focus our attention, opportunities, this feeling that, Troy spoke about, that people feel there aren't the opportunities there. And so young black people will refrain from taking qualifications or getting themselves prepared because they feel there's a ceiling to what's possible. And we need their voices in those decision-making areas. We need to show people that the opportunities do exist. And that's got to be at every level of the game.